So hello and welcome to the sixth and final coaching session for the 2019 pastorate cohort. During these sessions, we've been hearing about ways that parishes are living out the core mission priorities through intentional efforts to form missionary disciples. We call these the hallmarks of an evangelizing parish. Today, we're going to focus on the core mission priority of mission support and the practice of building a culture of stewardship that supports the mission. Our guest is Lisa Sliker, Parish Administrator at Our Lady of Perpetual Help in Ellicott City. So welcome, Lisa.
Hi, great to be with you.
Good. I'm so glad that you're here. So before we dive into our topic, though, let's first remember that we're in the holy presence of God, even as we're all in our separate homes or offices. And let's begin our conversation with a prayer. I'm going to put up the pastorate planning prayer. And I encourage you all to join in our prayer here. So let's pray in the name of the Father, Son, and the Holy Spirit. Merciful Father, pour out your spirit of wisdom and love to guide us in this pastoral planning process to be missionary disciples of your Son, Jesus Christ. Transform us through the Eucharist we share, that it may become the source and summit of our lives. Make us truly welcoming to all of your people, that our hearts may open to your grace and mercy. Walk with us as we accompany one another along the path of spiritual growth and discipleship. And send us forth to proclaim the joy of the gospel through faith, service, justice, and love of others, most especially the poor. May we never lose sight of our sacred mission to go and make disciples of all nations, so that in this Archdiocese of Baltimore, the light of Christ would always be a light brightly visible. Amen. In the name of the Father, Son, and the Holy Spirit. So, Lisa, thanks again for being with us today. I invited you to share with us a little bit about how Our Lady of Perpetual Help has built a culture of stewardship for the mission. Because OLPH is today a great example of parish stability and mission orientation. But I understand this has been evolving, so maybe over the past 10 years or so. So I thought we could start our conversation with your account of how the parish's understanding of mission and mission support has evolved over the years. And as well, what some of the ways of your own understanding of mission and mission support has shifted. So maybe you could tell us a little bit of the background that brought you all to the point where you are right now.
Sure, that'd be great. So again, my name is Lisa Sliker, and I serve the church through Our Lady of Perpetual Help as her parish administrator. My backstory is I have a degree in accounting, CPA, did the traditional work for one of the big auditing companies, worked on Wall Street and then in corporate trust here in Maryland. So I worked in the corporate sector first, took a little bit of time off to raise children. And then the Lord's pretty funny because a lot of your days are in formation for what his future plan is for you. So he gives you all these experiences because someday he's going to say, I need you to use those sufferings and experiences for my glory. So a lot of what I have done in business is very much in line with my charisms and my natural talents. And now it's an honor to be able to take what I've learned and how he has formed me to serve the church. So back in 2008, I started volunteering at OLPH because we were in a really messy place. We were about $5 million in debt. Every single structure on campus needed repair. Our school was literally falling down. The whole building had to be excavated and rebuilt. Our church was in horrible shape. Nothing had been cared for. And on top of all of that, we had $5 million in debt. So we were in the midst of a capital campaign, and I started first helping with that campaign. And then our associate pastor was leaving, and our pastor at the time said, I need somebody to help keep me organized. So I stepped into a position that was just a position. And we started kind of like when you move into a house and you kind of open up the drawers and you're like, oh my gosh, every drawer I opened up was literally a junk drawer. Everything was messy. There was no organization, there was no order, nothing. And as a type A personality with a gift of charism and natural gift of administration, I started twitching. And you're like, okay, we got to get something in order. And the crazy part is when you're in chaos, it's really hard to envision stability, and you don't even see the roadmap to stability. And when you're in chaos, you spend so much of your energy just trying to keep your head above water and trying to stay stable. So the key thing was to take one thing at a time and work on it. In hindsight, the couple of other things that I learned was that what I was doing for the church, I always considered as secondary, that the people that were really ministering were those that were in faith formation, the priests, the catechists, that they were the mission of the church. And I do take a little bit of reservation in calling this mission support, because it's really integral to the mission. It's not a support that stands outside. It really is a ministry of the church. And to give me a little bit of credit on those words, or strength to those words, I look at St. Paul. And in Corinthians, he explicitly calls administration a gift. And when you spell out administration, ministry is literally in the middle. So of course it's a ministry. So it took me a little bit of time to reshape my attitude, knowing that I loved the church and wanted to desire to work for the church, to not consider myself second string, but to really appreciate that the work that I'm doing is critical to the mission that Jesus Christ gave us. So that was a definite learning experience. The other learning experience was that it wasn't healthy for us to just do everything. And I equate it to, and I steal this from an author, to have a jar, and it's like everything that every parishioner comes up to you and says, oh, we have to have that speaker, we need to have that event, we need this ministry, we need this style of prayer, and you have to say yes to everything because we don't like to disappoint people. Well, then as a result, we have this big jar of a whole bunch of things happening, and we're really busy, but busyness isn't a good measure of how successful we are adhering to the mission. So those were a couple of learning points, and I can keep talking on and on and on our learning points. But the key thing was we had to get back to, why are we here and what are we doing as a result of why we are here? And the reason we're here is really simple. Like, we all know it. It was in the prayer we were just given, the Great Commission. And we're here because of one person, Jesus Christ. So when we use those two guiding principles as to the why, then everything else circles around it. So, so that's kind of like a beginning intro, and we'll keep diving into those premises, but it definitely was a formation for myself and for the parish to get us to where we are. Are we done? Absolutely not. Just like us as human beings, we're not done until we take our last breath. So you might retire from your job, but you're not done with life. So we're never done perfecting.
Yeah. So it definitely sounds like it has been something that's been evolving and is continuing to evolve. And certainly, our parishes are not static communities. As people come and go, there is a constant need to kind of reinforce the mission perspective of the community, of the parish, to form ministers in that perspective as well. As far as mission support goes, we talk about mission support as being basically bringing all of the gifts of the community to the service of the mission. And you've said that parishioners are really offering their gifts to the church, and as staff, as ministers, as representatives of that church, our job is to protect and use those gifts wisely. In other words, we're to be good stewards of those gifts and direct them in a way that really expresses the mission of the church and the mission that Christ has entrusted to us. At OLPH, you've been very strategic about the way that you've allocated those resources based on mission. Mm-hmm. And I know you have a discipleship pathway that kind of helps you evaluate some of those some of those requests for directing the resources in one way or another. So maybe you could spend a little bit of time describing what your discipleship pathway is and how you use it to filter the mission support decisions.
Sure. Yep. So my job description or my title description on my LinkedIn page is that I provide leadership and day-to-day supervision of the financial and temporal affairs of the parish in such a way that it enables the pastor to concentrate as much as possible on the spiritual affairs of the parish. And the guiding principle that we use in this position is that we're looking to protect the church from liabilities. We're looking to protect the church from liabilities, but also protect her asset. And her greatest asset, as far as besides resources, our staff and our parishioners' talents, is the money that they give to us in offertory. That is on our balance sheet and our income statement. And we have to treat it as a gift. It's an offering. We call it offertory, but it's a gift of another person to us because they trust us and they believe in what we're doing in relation to God's mission for his church locally at his parish. So we need to look at every dollar as a sacrifice of another person. And when they sacrifice that dollar, because they could have given it to another not-for-profit, or they could have left it in their own account for a vacation, or maybe to get dessert that week, whatever their intentions were, they trusted it to us. And when we appreciate that gift, just like, Christmas morning when you come down and there's your favorite gift under the tree, when you appreciate it in that way, you're going to be very cognizant on how you spend your expenses. So so everything down to what are our vendors charging us in this time of pandemic? Did we turn off our trash collection? Did we cut back on cutting of grass? And even in normal operations, the company that is offering pest control, are they overcharging us? Do we need a different type of service? So it's very important to look at how we spend all of our expenses for our facilities, but then we also need to think about the use of our facilities. So every person that wants to claim space on our campus, what are they looking to do with that space? Does it support the mission of the church? So it becomes very easy to say yes and no when you've got rules. So what we decided was, we've got the Great Commission and the Great Commandment, and we have this beautiful teaching of Jesus Christ of what it means to form missionary disciples. Let's take that teaching and bundle it up into what we call our discipleship pathway. And we've labeled our discipleship pathway here at Our Lady of Perpetual Help 4, because there are 4 key elements that we didn't come up with. We just modernized them with language that Jesus presented to us. He told us that we are to belong to him and to each other in the Great Commandment. And then we know that if we try to put catechesis before encounter, it's like taking an egg and throwing it on Teflon. It doesn't stick. It's better to first have fallen in love than to learn and want to know more about the person. There's a reason that we look to spend time with what might not be our spouse. We spend time, we get to know them, and in that encounter and in that love, falling in love with them, then we choose to marry them. Then we start to become like each other, and you wear the same color t-shirts and you watch movies and all the fun things. And then you go out into the world and you tell everybody how much you love this person. So at OLPH, we've just taken the proclamation, and St. John Paul II has laid it out as well, that we hope people would come into community with God and each other at our parish. And we know that people are longing for community. If you open up your phone and you look to update your phone, there's tons of apps that help you connect with others. Right now, we're Zooming because we're desiring to see our family members and our friends. So we know there's an intention to belong. Why not belong to a community with virtues that's going to guide you in great ways? So belong. Then to believe in Christ, to encounter him, to come to be with him at adoration, to come to appreciate his love for you in his story, in the Word, in Bible, to come to connection with him in Eucharistic communion. And then as we've encountered him, our hearts become so on fire because that love that we were made out of is now with us and reflecting back to him. So because we've encountered him, then we desire to know more about him. We start reading, we go to Bible studies, we're in small groups, and we're reinforcing that back and forth love of encountering and getting to know him, so that when we go to the world, we serve others in his name. We minister to others, which means we're looking to meet their spiritual, emotional, and physical needs in the name of Christ. So that's our discipleship pathway. Once we've laid that out, then we can say, okay, Jane Doe, you want to have bingo here? Tell me which element of the discipleship pathway bingo falls into. And perhaps it's Catholic bingo. And as a result, it fits in with belong, because we're looking to create community. But if it's just, people sitting around and gossiping, no, that doesn't fit in with our discipleship pathway. So it gives us a great way to not only say how we're going to use our finances, because we have to turn the light and the heats on. And let me tell you, we just got our BGE bill this month, and turning the heat and the light on, or the air conditioning soon, is quite an expense. And going back to that was a gift that somebody gave to us. We're turning on that light and heat. Or we have our youth minister wanting to do a program. Does it form disciples? So it gives us really good structure to be able to say yes and to be able to gently say no, or redirect a person. Sometimes we get great ideas, and when we help them see how we want to restrict their or guide our fundings well, then they creatively alter. So it's a great way of not having just this big jar of a whole bunch of things happening, but also a cross sector. The other thing it does for us is it allows for us to ensure balance, because if we only have belong events, well, then we become a social club. And that's not what we're called to do. We're called to have a distribution of offerings across the discipleship pathway throughout the course of the year. Because if you join in September and all your belong events are in the first quarter of the year, then you miss out. So you want to keep offering through the year. So remembering that the mission of the church is the reason we exist, and then having a discipleship a pathway on top of that, then it allows for us to manage the support and operations in a prudent way.
Now, if I'm not mistaken, I remember you talking a little bit about how you kind of challenged some of your ministries. Did you do a like a ministry assessment that would help you begin to see where you were maybe heavy in one area or light in another? And then I guess the follow-up would be, if you are the folks who are doing bingo and you see that that there isn't a really strong connection to one of those elements of your discipleship pathway, is there an opportunity to engage in a conversation then that kind of challenges them to think about how that could be a stronger tie-in? What did you do along those lines?
So 3 things that came to mind when you were asking those questions. The first one is how we were able to adapt our staff and ministry leaders to the discipleship pathway was we have 2 forms you need to fill out to either request space on campus and or have advertisement in our bulletin, Facebook, or LCD screens. And one of the questions on those forms is, which element of the discipleship pathway does this event support? So they are already on the front end committing, this is a belong event. And it works beautifully for us as well in communicating this event. So it's a nice partnership, because if the event is, say, a family dinner night, well, then it's a belong event. And then when we create the graphic that supports the advertisement to this event, we have a special icon that when you go out and watch our video, you'll see all this, but there's an icon that supports 4, and each one of those elements is a specific color. So all of our belong events are coded as green. So when the event is a belong event, that icon only has the one little segment colored in green. And our parishioners have then been trained, conditioned to understand that if I see a green icon, I know this is a belong event. I should go there with the anticipation of connecting with other people. Not to say that it's exclusively belong, because often we'll have an event that crosses over many of the elements, but it kind of emphasizes one. So with that parameter, no, you're not going to get an advertisement in the bulletin, and it's based on our social media or our prominence on our digital screenage, unless it supports the mission. And then second, if you want space on campus, you also need to be able to show us which element it supports. So that's one way that we were able to do that. But before we could say, hey, which one of these elements is your event in line with, you first have to train up your ministry leaders to appreciate the kerygma, to appreciate why the church exists and what is the role of ministry. So a few years back, as a staff, we, not invited, but required every ministry leader to attend 7 sessions. And the first 5 sessions broke open for them what is the kerygma, and then how the church came to be, Pentecost, perfect time, and then what is ministry in relation. And we call that mission-focused formation, because we realized not only did our staff need to be in appreciation, but we needed to be working in concert with our ministry leaders, informing them in this manner. At the end of all of that came a couple of really cool things. One, the opportunity to hold them accountable, to keep teaching them year after year. But now what we do is at this time of the year, we ask them to spotlight to us what has been their greatest success story. We know they've done so much for the world, our parish, our parishioners, the Lord in the course of the year, but what is their greatest spotlight? And we culminate all that together and have like a celebration of works, great works that has been done in His name through the course of this year. And it gives them, people in the old days would have said, let's have a ministry fair. Well, a ministry fair is nice and you walk around from table to table, but you really get to appreciate what happens as a result of you. So in conjunction with sharing what is happening as a result of these ministries, we know that people thrive when they're serving in accordance to their giftedness, whether it's their natural abilities or their spiritual gifts or their passions. So another thing that we are close to completely executing, but we have a couple of hiccups with our third-party vendor, is the opportunity for a person to do a self-assessment. What are my natural gifts? What are my charisms? And what are my passions? And we tailor the questions to what are the works of ministry. So do we need to know that you can drive a stick shift? Maybe if we have a bus that needs to be driven, but we don't. So we wouldn't put that kind of question in our assessment. But do we want to know that you love pulling weeds? Absolutely, because we have a spring cleanup. Do we want to know that you love cooking or chopping vegetables? Absolutely, because we have an outreach mission that makes, well, right now 2,000 sandwiches, but normally meals for 600 to 800 people every week. So we tailor these questions to help a person identify their giftedness. Then on the ministry side, all of their needs are written with which one of these gifts, talents, passions fit, because then the idea is the Lord created you uniquely with these beautiful gifts, and His church has needs. And when those needs are presented to you, then it's like Netflix for Catholic. It's the world, the worlds come together, and then we get to serve in accordance with our giftedness. So the full body spectrum around all of this is there's a mission that needs to be fulfilled. We are integral in that mission, and we're gifted to help make that happen. We have money that is supporting the works. We want to use it wisely. So the money that's coming in needs to be spent in a way that supports the mission. And the things that we support are human resources, facilities, operations, and outreach.
So I think because we're re-recording this, and I know there are a number of people who are going to be watching this later, what I'd like to do is just take a quick break and take a look at the video that's on your website that describes FOR, and maybe gives people then a good idea of how what you're describing could play out in the in the ministry context relative to your discipleship pathway. So let me just see if I can get that getting booted up here. And once we watch this video, then I'm going to ask if there's anybody who has any specific questions that they want to ask, and we can dig in.
We've all asked ourselves, where do I belong? What's the purpose of my life? The answer to these questions and every longing of the human heart is found in Jesus Christ. Out of His great love, God created you not just to exist, but to live a life fulfilled. He designed you with an incredible plan and purpose in mind, and when followed, that unique plan is meant to radically change the world. With 4 words directly from Him, Jesus offers us a way of living and a pathway to walk. Come and see. An invitation for you to belong to a community centered around Christ, where friendships are made and support is found in each other. Who do you say that I am? An appeal for you to believe in something and someone greater than yourself. Follow me. A call to become like Jesus in your thoughts, words, and deeds, so that the world can see Him through you. Go, make disciples. A command to go beyond your own limits and transform the world by bringing God's love to your neighbor. These 4 simple words provide a pathway to joy and purpose in Jesus. It's all about the 4 to transform your life and the world. So what are you waiting for? Belong, believe, become, beyond.
Yeah, if I could just interject a little bit right there. So that video and our website, we redid the website last year with the intentionality that the website was going to be structured and presented for the person looking for a spiritual home. Everything that's on our website is inviting to meet a person where they're at, not to just say our doors are open, we've built it and come. It's more of to meet a person of where they're at. So even some of the language in that video was intentional so that a person can feel like I'm not on the outside. I don't have to get my act together and then come to Mass, then come to church, but here I'm being reached out to. So we intentionally have our website structured that way. And then when you go under our parish life, we build out who we are, but in tiles that are places of connectedness. And even on the front page of the website, under they call it the hero image, there's 4 pieces of key real estate. And we know that people church for 4 specific reasons. They do want to connect, they want to serve, they need pastoral care, oh gosh, what's the other one that I'm forgetting? Oh, prayer, pastoral care and support. No, what am I missing? Service, community, prayer, and pastoral care. Those are the 4. So we intentionally put that on the screen because if a person's searching and they're looking for the need of care, there it is. And then they dive in and they appreciate that the sacraments is one of the key ways. Receiving prayer is another, like it's all packaged together. Then we have our church management software, which is the tools behind the scenes to help make all of the mechanics work.
So I want to just pause there and see if anybody has any questions. I don't know. Julie's been monitoring our chat here. I don't know if anybody has put anything in there, or if anybody just wants to break in, go ahead and unmute yourself and feel free to ask a question.
There was a question. Someone was just wondering who helped make that video, because it was awesome.
Thank you. Yeah. So my prior boss, Father Arnold, and I, we wrote the content for the video, and then we have a relationship with a graphic design studio or couple. We call them our digital evangelizers because that's what they are. They're not just communications. Everything that they do in content is digital, but it's for the sake of evangelizing. So it's Henderson Creative is the company we work with, and that we come up with these visions and then they make it pretty.
It's really beautiful. I love the for, the belong, the everything. How long and what was the process of your community coming up with those, with the for, and continuing on to make that a significant part of who the parish is?
Right. So as I was saying earlier, the front part of my time working with Father Arnold at OLPH was getting us out of chaos, getting us to a place of stability.
Right, past that.
And in the midst of that, like, there's this appreciation, like, how often do you spend your days, you're like working, you're like, oh, if I could just get to that to-do list, if I could just get to that creative thing I want to work on. It's almost as if, like, it takes a time like now for us to, like, clean up databases, clean up our census, consider changing vendors. So we spent a good chunk of time realizing how broken we were. And as we were realizing what didn't work, we needed to learn, how can we even get this organized? So we started reading a lot, researching a lot, attending conferences, attending cohorts. We were part of a 2-year cohort. We were courageous. Like, we said, you know what, the Catholic Church is not giving us the tools to get organized, including our church management software. So we started looking at our Christian neighbors and looking at success stories. And that's the best place to start. Like, Rick Warren, he taught one of our cohorts for Parish Catalyst, and he said, I do not patent any of my stuff, and I only speak to pastors, because my goal is to make sure that Christ is known in every tribe and every nation, because then he promises to come back. So he said, I have made so many mistakes at your benefit, and if it's working for me, I want to share it with you. And that's what in our faith, one Holy Catholic Apostolic Church is what we're supposed to be. Not, hey, they have my envelopes or they stole my parishioner. We've got to be working together, because it's right there. We're supposed to be working together. So learning from others, especially their successes, doesn't mean you just pick the book off the shelf or take the program and pop in the videos. Every parish is unique to their community and their parishioners. And what becomes most challenging is trying to tweak what you have for the needs of that community. So it was definitely an evolution. And even as we work through it now, you got to get your staff on board. And getting your staff on board often means they need to know how to learn to work as a team. The article that Daphne pointed out from American Magazine about more than a desk job, the spirituality of administration, is a great article. And as I was reading it, I couldn't help but think of Pat Lancioni, and it's the 5 dysfunctions of a team. Like, if we don't work together as a team and just remain in our silos, we will never operate. What car can operate unless the gears come together? And administration is often the teeth of the gears coming together, making sure they stay together. And it requires a person to share and work with one another. Yesterday, we had a staff meeting, and I was pushing out an idea, and one person said, well, I'm so overwhelmed because my blank program is about to start. And I'm like, we're all overwhelmed. But if we don't do this, which requires all of us to do, we're missing out on such. So to remember that the administrator is not the person that says, show me why you want to spend this money. But they build the budget that supports the mission, which is another layer we haven't even gotten into yet, is that when we've got this vision of this is what we need to do, and this is how we're going to do it, we already know why we're going to do it, then we can be very deliberate in building a budget that supports the mission. So I'll sit in finance committee meetings, and often they'll be like, oh, we need to make sure we have enough money for capital expenditures. And I'm saying, we also need to make sure that we're hiring somebody to bridge the gap that we don't have covered right now, young adults. So it's a nice balance to be able to think of things in the full spectrum, that there's a comprehensive and cohesive plan. So 4 allows for us to be a little more structured and organized in what we want to offer, but then on the back end, we have to be doing it as a team. Otherwise, it's going to fall apart.
And do you find, Lisa, that that having that kind of overarching vision helps you and the pastor kind of keep people focused when the day-to-day stuff could maybe begin to take over and maybe vie for attention, in the moment? Does that help you kind of reorient and remember, this is why we're here, this is what we're all driving for?
Mm-hmm. It's a lot easier to say no when you have a bad guy. Like, you might say mom said no, or dad said no, or the archdiocese said no. It's like a lot easier when you have a bad guy to be able to say no. But it's a lot cleaner when you're also saying, why you're saying yes is because Jesus Christ commissioned us to do it this way. And then as administrators, 4 important things we do as administrators is we manage, we direct, we lead, and we control. And those things are possible when you have a vision. The mission of the church is one and done, given to us. Then our vision of how locally we want to implement it makes it our unique expression of it. But our approach in administering that way comes from managing well, because you're going to have a lot of plates in the air, lots of balls in the air. So you need to be able to manage. And when you have that structure of a discipleship pathway, a clear vision, then it's much easier to manage. You can direct your initiatives. You can say yes, you can say no. You know how to lead your people. You know where you're leading your people to. And then you can also control that stability in day to day. So I think of it especially now with my friends with young children. Every day having structure helps the kids. They know what their expectations are. A different point to pull back is with Sherry Riddell's work. One of the points that she made is that people are leaving the church because their spiritual needs aren't being met. So we need to know what are those needs and be able to offer them. So again, that whole being able to meet a person where they're at, but then also offer things that meet their spiritual needs, so we don't let them slip through the crack. Because our what we also need to be attentive to is we need to know our people so we can grow our people and retain our people. And that's a different side of this conversation with having strong tools in our toolbox. And I guess another backstory to Stephanie's question, like how did you get here, is that we had, after we went through all this training, we had the vision in our mind of like, okay, we know what we want it to look like. And then we went to the toolbox, and it's like having the blueprints to build your house, and you didn't know how the heck to build the house because you don't have the hammer and the saw and everything else. When we got to a place of having structure and a strong website and a strong church management software, then we had the tools to be able to manage the initiatives, to control and to lead. Our next big phase that we need to work on is raising up leaders. Not that we say, okay, we want the younger adult. It's even within, our women's ministry. We have a few women who are doing a lot. And I said, your greatest gift you can do right now is look down, raise up, and empower, and then step back. And when we are not so much, well, I've done this for 20 years, or I'm always the one that picks out the flowers, like that's not helpful. So our next big goal is to be focusing on forming leaders, discipleship leaders. So again, continuously evolving.
Tom, you had a question.
Yeah, so Lisa, that was terrific. And I'm actually fairly familiar with the parish. I don't live that far away. I guess none of us do. I hang out with a lot of those guys on Saturday morning at 6:45 a.m. So I know the church pretty well, but maybe 3 questions if I could, and I don't think they're too tough, but how does the 4 kind of engage the young adults? How do you make sure that's engaging young adults, right? And the second part of that is kind of, one thing I'm starting to understand is sometimes even like a lot of people really struggle with the term missionary discipleship. And we said that prayer in our parish for over 1.5 years. But that whole word missionary discipleship, it actually kind of scares people. And people get really content to just try to service the pews. And what was really clear from Pope Francis in Joy to the Gospel is get out of your church. So the second part of the question is, how does the 4 embrace this idea that we're looking for lost sheep, right? Because Rick Warren will tell you, he never looks for a Christian from another church. He is looking for the unbaptized, the untold. He's looking for that. The third part of this is, I think what OLPH has done and the story you have just told so beautifully is how critical organization is to the ministry, right? And it's like you said, you opened a drawer and everything was chaos every time you opened one. And I find a little bit of my experience is people just seem so comfortable in that chaos, right? And it seems like such a big deal. So maybe the simple part of the third question is, you mentioned Patrick Lencioni. Did you guys do anything with Amazing Parish to get some of that organization? Okay.
Yep.
Which is kind of interesting because they're so connected to kind of Alpha, right? They're so connected to the Alpha program with Father Mallon, and Father Arnold was so Christ-like. So, but anyway, so those kind of 3 points: young adults, find the lost sheep, and you answered the third, which is you guys did do some work with Amazing Parish.
Yeah, and we'll probably have to keep going through each one at a time because I have a lot to say. As you were saying something like, oh, tell them that. One of my favorite, so I've done some national speaking over the decade on various topics around church management and discipleship formation. But one of the things I used in a talk was moving people from being pew potatoes to, pew warmers. What was it? How did I say? Oh no, pew potatoes to greater potato. Oh my gosh, I forgot it. But it was basically like, a couch potato. You're a couch potato. You're a pew potato. You want to move them from being a pew potato to a greater potato, I think it was. But there was something funnier in there. I'll have to find it. But the key thing is, even those that come and sit in the pews, they act as a consumer, and we're looking for them to become contributors. And as a consumer, they also have often expectations, and it's really hard to manage expectations because, again, it's very easy for people to get angry at a person and walk away from God, and that's horrible. That's the last thing we want. So coming back to the young adults, they are an interesting breed. And I did a talk a few years back about millennials, but now it's even beyond millennials. So now we're at, Gen Z, Gen Y. Gen Y is now designated between Gen Y A and Gen Y B, or Gen Y1, Gen Y2. Even Gen Y is being broken apart because the front end of Gen Y grew up and learned in a different technological place than the latter part of the generation. So even 20 years has such disparity. So, but one of the things that keeps coming out, and Jim Beckman just did a webinar, for the Catholic Charismatic Renewal Group 2 or 3 weeks ago, and he spoke of young adults don't want to come to your church. They want you to come to them, which is why a Theology on Tap and an Alpha are successful, because you're out in community, but they're longing for community. So belong really becomes such an important element. They're thirsty to belong, and they don't want to come and see They want you to be able to tell them why they should participate. They're very, very anxious to serve. They want to serve. They want to serve very much in relation to their causes. And the Catholic Church, look at, Catholic Relief Services. We so beautifully serve in a multitude of ways, many ways, education, healthcare, like the list is endless. Do young adults appreciate how those passions and charisms are available in service? So yeah, we can do a much better job branding and marketing who we are. So yeah, we do look to have young adults be very cognizant of who they are, what is their learning experience. And right now, what we're doing technologically, like we're getting ready to do our Pentecost novena next Friday night, and it ends with a vigil. And I was thinking about, there's a lot of Catholics that are surface Catholics, and a novena is enough to be like, I don't know what to do with a novena. And then it's Pentecost, oh my gosh, well, that's even crazier. Teaching opportunities, like young adults love to sit back and watch first and then come see. The reason we developed our website for the person looking, because it used to be a person church hopped. The old days, a person went to their parish because canon law required them to go within their boundaries. Then we became church hoppers. Then we became church shoppers online through website. Now we're even a step further back where we're just a voyeur watching, and we're going to watch first before we're going to come and experience. So with these Pentecost vigils and novenas, as well as everything we're doing with live streaming masses, we should be sending out that message to the person. 5 times the amount of people that come to our pews are watching us online right now. So making them teaching opportunities, meeting them where they are at, is such a beautiful opportunity right now. So that's your young adult question. And then the second part, I think of it, and you might have to repeat a question or two if I don't hit all the questions here, but rather than it being the words of missionary disciple, because yeah, that's a lot. And I'm like, okay, missionary, is that the person that goes to Africa and feeds the poor? Disciple, does that mean I have to get a certificate from like a college first before I'm eligible to do this? Like, it's overwhelming. But as you saw in the video, we were born for a purpose. And we spend so much of our life, whether we are in a church community or not, but if you go out and you ask people, what is your purpose in life? Or they might say, I have no purpose. I don't know what the purpose of my life is. If they come to appreciate that their unique creation, never to be replicated ever again, is how deeply the Lord has formed them for a purpose in life. It's why their life is worthy of dignity. Then they start to go, really? And then you point them to how they're called to serve others. So I think if we go back to those questions we led in from the video with, that might be a better place of understanding rather than, the catechetical formation of a missionary disciple. Did I hit all your questions?
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah, and I think the one that I think I struggle with a little bit is I was one of those lost sheep that heaven celebrated over one day. And I just, how do you move the energy in the parish to be concerned outside of the walls of the church? Because you're right, you got a lot of consumers in the church, and it'd be great to turn them to contributors. And I actually kind of have that thought pretty often I have that thought that, it's really hard to do the work on the outside if the people on the inside don't have shovels,
Yeah.
But just that whole idea of missionary discipleship and like your guys' SALT program and stuff like that, and some of that really cool stuff where you really do go to the poor and everything. I mean, all of that is really good. There's still that idea of discipleship that's to spread the good news to all the ends of the earth, right?
Yeah. And yeah, SALT is one of my favorite ways to serve through the church. And for those of you that are not familiar, every Saturday and Sunday morning, we go into Baltimore City and we set up tables on the street. And it started with a cup of coffee and a pastry, because one of our parishioners, who's now a deacon, Steve Sarnecki, he came to the parish with an idea. I want to just respect a human being. and give them a smile, and it's going to start with a cup of coffee. And then our parishioners always get crazy about stuff because they love the world so much. Like, well, why don't we make them a homemade breakfast? And hey, let's check out Dunkin' Donuts because they throw out their donuts. And Panera Bread, they're also looking to contribute. And we make the best oatmeal in the world. So what started with a pastry and a coffee wound up becoming this full-on meal, homemade meal. And we get there and there's 200 people lined up to be fed. And it's not just about giving them the food, but looking them in the face and saying, hi, what is your name? And sometimes they're shocked and they say, no one has asked me my name for a month, which means I have not had identity or purpose for a month. From that, we then start conversations. We talk about where I serve, it's addiction recovery. We talk about addiction recovery. We talk about addiction. We talk about the Lord. Our Legion of Mary teams with us. They pray over people. They hand out rosary. They hand out divine mercy prayers. They bring Immaculate Conception medals. They bring a person into appreciation and give them something to hold on to during the course of the week after the food has run through their belly and now they still have a prayer over them and so forth. They come back in encouragement and they come back with words like, I stayed clean this week because I didn't want to disappoint you. This is the only food I have for the week. Like, you realize who you are for the world. And it becomes very easy to evangelize that community because they're 2 steps removed from us. So I can be very courageous and talk about Jesus to them. Get me at a family gathering and have to talk with my family members about Jesus. Well, then sometimes the steak knives have to be put away. It's not as easy. But even in the supermarket, you know, we're called to be that person. And it starts first with a friendly conversation. It starts first with building the trust. Just as on our parish side, we received some pushback at the beginning of the lockdown, at the beginning of our time at home. Why aren't you pushing e-giving? And we said, because we have been building a culture of stewardship for so long. We've got a nice nest egg. Is our income down by 50%? Yes, but because we were attentive to building up our reserves and building up electronic giving, we do have a source of income, and we want to respect that some of our parishioners might be very worried right now. Not either they've already been furloughed or laid off, or they see that coming down the path in the next couple of weeks. So we'll remind them, but our steward of culture, our culture of stewardship has been one of financial transparency and building trust, like letting them know that everything you do or give to us, we're going to protect that asset and we're going to be transparent to you, such that they've entrusted they've entrusted their money to us, and we in return are responsible to using that, and from that relationship of knowing Christ, loving Christ, and appreciating what we're doing, then comes the giving. So it's not like give to us, now we need that guilt. It doesn't work that way. But when it's flipped out to here we are for you at this time. So Tom, to your point, because that was very, very long-winded, yes, it's great to be able to serve at SALT, but once we leave our campus, we've entered mission territory. And how we choose to use our language always has to be charitable. My friend Father John, we say it all the time, meet the person in charity. You're not going to win a heart with an argument.
I think this idea of building a culture is really one of the key things that, you know, when I talk to you and other people who have been at this for a long time, it kind of is the common theme, which is it takes time, and it also takes intentionality. And all of the things that we've been talking about here today are things that you didn't just wake up one morning and say, here's how it's all going to work. Was a slow unfolding of understanding, of growing together with your community, and as well being intentional about thinking about what happens in the parish so that people are formed in a way that they begin to see their life through the lens of discipleship. modeling my life more and more after Christ and looking for those opportunities, seeing the opportunities that God presents us with on a daily basis. It takes time, but the parish is the place where those kinds of opportunities can unfold. If we make them a priority, if we make them the focal point of what we offer, what we kind of the expectations that we place on ourselves and others who are part of that community, so that when somebody feels moved by the Spirit to go out and pray with the homeless, there are opportunities there for them to take advantage of. So I know I want to be conscious of our time here. This has been a really great conversation. The last question that I want to put out there for you, and then maybe even if anybody wants to join in on some ideas that they have, is, if you're just starting to think about reorienting things in the parish to be more mission focused, what would be kind of the very first starting point? Where would you want to start that conversation, and what's the first step that somebody might want to consider taking?
Wow. So the very first step is that you need a leadership team. You can't do anything by yourself. And the beauty of all of us is that we're different and we bring different gifts to the table. So before we can start a plan, you need to be surrounded by people that are as passionate and willing to serve, not in self-interest, but cohesively for the sake of the calling. So start with the team, and then make sure that you're all operating out of the same place, that don't take for granted that everybody appreciates the charisma, that everybody appreciates the purpose of a parish. It's not just to get people to come to Mass. So to have a little bit of educational time. So you start with a team that's going to be the implementers. You ensure that they're all operating out of the same page and that there's no one there just for the sake of being able to say, Father picked me, I'm the most important. Because again, it's not about them. It's about one person and only one person. Everything we're doing is about Jesus Christ. And if we can't get out of the way, we can't be a part. So you have to start with that leadership. And then in those, I talked already about the why, being the mission of the church, and then what we're called to do as administrators by managing, directing, controlling, and leading. But then when we come down to the how are we going to get this done? Some of those things that we don't like to talk about. I remember I gave a talk one time, gosh, it was 10 years ago, and I was talking about recensusing and how important it is to have a strong census and know your people so you can retain your people and grow your people. And the priest that was in my course, and this was when I was really a baby Catholic employee, he said, I am never going to let any person pull a cell phone out at Mass and text during Mass. I'm like, okay. But if we're that resistant to change, like 3 months ago, would anyone have said, we're going to live stream our Mass as Catholics? We would have said, absolutely not, because presence is important, because of the Eucharist, and it is. But what we've learned is how many people were not able to come to church for months before we had live streaming because of illness. And now they are. We've connected with a community of nuns in Michigan that can't have Mass anymore. Now they're streaming our Mass. So it's really made us a universal church praying together. So here's the things that Catholics don't want to hear. You've got to have an owner. There's got to be ownership. If everybody owns a task, nothing's going to get done. And if nobody owns a task, nobody will do it well. So you've got to have ownership. So whatever you're coming up with as you're becoming a team and you're working from the same place, not in silos together, not because of I, but because of him, then the next step is everything you're planning out, you need an owner. Then you have to track effectiveness. And when I first started, again, because I came from a business culture and I came in, I'm like, well, are we measuring that? Who's being held accountable? Like, the ownership piece is the part of accountability, but the effectiveness is the measurement. And the pushback I would get from the staff meetings were, you can't measure a person's heart. Well, you can, you know, even biologically, you can measure a person's heart. It's called an EKG machine, but you can measure the behaviors of a person as a result. But there's lots that we do at a church that will use coverage of, like, it bore fruit. Okay, great. If it bore fruit, did you name that fruit? Like, how did you know it bore fruit? And if it bore fruit, what did you do with that fruit? Did you turn it into jelly, jam, wine, grape juice? What did you do with that fruit? So measurement is something we don't like to do. It's creative to identify how we're going to measure. But if we don't measure, if you can't measure it, you can't improve. So that's the next important thing. And then tools, you've got to have a toolbox. You can't build a house without tools. So ensuring that you have not just the right people and tools, but the right technology, the right programs, all of that. Then we've used, when you're looking at everything you're doing, and you take your calendar for either this past year or what will be next year, and you look at everything, you say, wow, there's a lot here. And some of the stuff is really good. Some of it's okay. We used, through Parish Catalyst, we learned of a assessment process called Start, Stop, and Refine. And you're looking at everything you're doing, and perhaps it's even religious education at the elementary level. And you're not going to stop that, but perhaps you need to refine it. So looking at every program, every event, every offering, and every ministry, and what in it do you need to start doing? What do you need to stop doing because it distracts you from doing other things well? And what do you need to refine? You're going to be able to start things because you stopped things. So that's another way to kind of add structure to the next steps that you want to take.
So before we close out here, I do want to ask if anybody has any other questions for Lisa, or if you want to offer any observations in terms of things that your parish is doing well, that you share with other people, kind of along these same lines. Maybe things that you have either been doing for a while, or in particular, things that have cropped up just over the last couple of months as really great ways that you've been sort of forced to think of things differently, and it has borne some fruit that you might want to consider continuing into the future or adapting, so that as we begin to move into our next phases of this reality, you're able to retain and continue to have that fruit being born. So any questions or last observations that you want to offer?
Well, I would throw out that during this time of pandemic, we've put a lot of things on hold, and then we've started up a lot of new initiatives. And some of those new initiatives aren't going to go away. And much of which we put on hold, we're not going to be able to turn the dial up completely and come out in operations fully. But there will be a time where much of that will come back. And what we've started doing now, we're not going to be able to stop. So we will need to be able to do things more effectively. So it is worth the reflection of what have we learned during this time of pandemic. What we are appreciating now is as we moved from chaos to stability over the past dozen years, much of what we put in place allowed for us to turn keys so quickly. Even down to, we had moved from Verizon traditional phone lines to voice over internet. And that allows for, somebody calls my office right now, the front office, and it twins to my phone. So they have no idea that they're calling me at home. But it's also allowed for the pastor to be able to return calls and keep his cell phone private, his phone number private. And it reduced our expenses by 2/3. So that's one example. Having a strong census, knowing everyone's email address and cell phone numbers, and knowing where they were in involvement. One of the things we are able to track, because we take attendance after all of our events, is where were they serving and where were they attending? Because if we saw great attendance around these certain discipleship formation, what we call become events, then as we went virtual, we wanted to ensure that that type of offering was still available. Financial stability. The diocese, we did a $2 million construction project 4 years ago. And in the application for finances, we were told we had to keep 4 months of reserve. Well, we're like, okay, we'll do that. And we've always retained it. I always thought we were going to need it we had to put in sprinklers into our church. And I always thought one of these years, they're going to freeze, those pipes are going to freeze, and our church is going to be flooded. And I always thought our reserves was going to be needed for that. I always thought it'd be facilities. I never thought it would be to ensure that we don't need to lay off a single staff member and we can keep doing our outreach. But thank God we were attentive to that stewardship priority, because having that safeguard allowed for us to be able to be a little more at peace right now. So, and over these years, we've been encouraging e-giving, and people were a little bit resistant to it. But if we didn't do that, we wouldn't have the income coming in on a weekly basis. So getting ourselves organized, we don't know what the future brings. Never would we have thought it was this. But because we had been attentive to a culture of stewardship, financial stability, and good operational practices, we reduced even down to attentiveness. When I first started, we had 13 significant items on our audit review. We have 0 now. So again, continuing to put yourself into a place of stability allows for that panic time to just breathe a little bit easier.
Any other questions or observations? Well, Lisa, thank you again for a really enlightening and engaging conversation here. And we just love hearing from parishes around the diocese that are doing some really exciting things. And it's so nice to be able to share and showcase local parishes who are really at the forefront of this kind of parish transformation effort to orient ourselves more and more towards the mission and to be laser focused on that. So thank you for sharing your time, for sharing your wisdom, and most importantly, for sharing your ministry with the entire people of God. I'm sure that you would be open to anybody reaching out to you for questions or suggestions for how they might look at things in their own parish. Again, you're parish administrator at Our Lady of Perpetual Help in Ellicott City. OLPH, let's see, your web address is olphparish.org. Anyone who wants to check that out. Thanks to everybody who's participating and all your good questions and conversation, and not just in this session, but in all of our sessions with the cohort coaching sessions. It's been a real pleasure, and thank you for all of your ministries in your parishes. I will make sure to send out a link to our video once we get it uploaded. For anybody who wants to share that, please do. And we're looking forward to continuing to work with you all as we build up the church here in the Archdiocese of Baltimore and make missionary disciples.
Thank you,
everybody. Have a great rest of your week.
I would just say, stay encouraged. When I started this job, I had no idea what I was doing. I didn't know what I was doing. So just stay encouraged.
Thank you. Take care.
Lisa, thanks everybody.
Bye.